Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's panel discussion, we're trying to do something that's really impossible. We're trying to forecast the future direction of artificial intelligence. Yep, that's hard to do. AI seems to change every 90 days, maybe even faster. New models, new AI tools, certainly corporate strategies change all the time. Still, I think it's important to try to forecast the future of AI. It's having such a profound impact on business, not to mention culture and everything else. Fortunately, to forecast that future, I'm joined by five top enterprise leaders, really the people shaping how businesses navigate AI going forward. These are the experts, no doubt about it. With me today is Beena Ammanath, a global head of the Deloitte AI Institute. Beena, hello to you. Good to have you with us today.
Glad to join you, James.
And I think you get out there, you speak quite a bit out there. Am I correct in thinking that?
Yes, I do. I am spreading the good word on AI.
Good, good. Also with me is Chad Dunn, Vice President, Product Management, Artificial Intelligence, and Data Management at Dell. But Chad, enlighten us on that position, if you would.
Formerly that title, but next week, new title, new company that brings me a lot closer to customers, a lot closer to hands-on with these solutions, and I couldn't be more excited.
Interesting. Okay, so we will wait to hear about that. Ram Chakravarti, Chief Technical Officer at BMC. I know, Ram, I've interviewed you multiple times. I've always been impressed with your expertise and your knowledge of the market. Very good to have you with us today.
Thanks, James. You're being kind, and I'm looking forward to a tete-a-tete with my fellow panelists and you.
Nabil Bukhari, President AI Platforms and CTO at Extreme Networks. That's a new title this year, correct, Nabil?
Yeah, it's just, it's just more work. That's
You're,
good.
you're, you're moving up in the world.
Yeah, it's fun and it's good to be back, and James, always a pleasure being here. And yeah, let's try to predict stuff. And one thing we know for sure, we'll all be wrong, but why not?
uh, Rounding out our panel is Sean Kask, Chief AI Strategy Officer at SAP. Hello to you, Sean. You're coming to us from Zurich, correct?
Correct, yeah. I'm a nighthawk though, so it suits me well. So
What time is it in Zurich right now?
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock. Oh, not too bad. Okay. All right. So before we look ahead to 2026, I'd like to get grounded in our present moment. So, how would you characterize where enterprise companies stand today in terms of their relationship with AI? If you had to define the current phase of enterprise adoption, AI adoption, how would you describe it? Is it happy, sad, afraid, ambitious? Bina, what do you see?
I think, when we group it all together as AI, it's a very broad bucket, and
Right.
that has existed for a long time, right? If the question was, where do you see with agentic AI or generative AI, the answers are slightly different. I've been in the AI space for since 2013. So that's a long time when it was called data science. But
Hmm.
that's, traditional AI to say it. And that I would say is well and thriving, and almost all enterprises are doing something with traditional AI. Generative AI, which was all the buzz, in the last 2 years, is now maturing and more in the scaled out and in enterprises. Agentic AI, the newest entrant earlier this year, is in the POC phase. There are a few instances where it has scaled out, but next year, next December, when we talk about this, that would have matured. So I think, AI as a broad category, there is equal amount of, reality and, value that you're getting. And there's equal amount of excitement on all the possibilities and new things that AI can do. And we're barely scratching the surface, James, as you know, because there's still so much more to do with AI as a core technology.
Well, it's interesting to hear you describe agentic AI as in the POC phase. I think there's plenty of vendors saying, "Oh no, no, we're ready. It's there. It's past POC." Maybe it's another discussion, but I think it's coming. Chad, what is your sense? Where are we at these days?
I think there are two things that are big changes from last year. One is that enterprises are getting a lot more sophisticated about how they look at the return on investment of AI deployments. It's not just, how much can I save, automating or using AI to augment an existing task. It's looking at things that are sort of non-traditional dimensions of return on investment, like, overall better decision-making capabilities, and things like that. And I think the other thing, and this gets to Beena's point a little bit, some of the most forward-looking customers that I'm seeing right now are making that mental shift away from hey, let's apply agentic AI to a workflow that we have versus let's assume that the primary interface is an agent. And I think we're seeing a little bit of that now. I think we're going to see a lot of that in the coming year.
Mm-hmm. Ram, your sense of where we are now, how are companies
Yeah,
doing?
I mean, I'll echo a couple of sentiments and add a couple as well. I mean, I agree on looking at algorithmic AI from a different lens with respect to value realization versus generative AI-based virtual assistants on top of enterprise RAG and prompt engineering. Those are starting to pan out, return on investment versus agentic AI, which in some cases goes beyond proof of concept. There are a couple of industry use cases in the insurance industry where end-to-end automation with agentic AI has enabled new revenue streams and reaching new previously unreachable commercial customers.
Mm-hmm.
But that said, there's a lot of agentic AI washing by vendors. And
Yes.
conversely, if you look at it from a customer's lens, I classify customers, enterprises into two buckets, the haves and have-nots. Haves are basically those with deep pockets of spend. Example being financial sector powerhouses that have invested in large AI data centers and phenomenal amounts of money in NVIDIA chips and what have you. They are gung-ho about it. They are embracing it much more aggressively than organizations who are spend constrained, who are maybe a tad more circumspect about what to invest in. And the last point that I would tie this to is to what Chad said, right? Which is, I mean, everybody's hyping about agentic AI. Yes, there's a workflow agent, which is a level zero AI, agentic AI use case. Yes, you can do that. But really, there is a fundamental paradigm shift from deterministic to probabilistic approach to implementing these systems that begs considerable change in organizations. So you've really got to look at it in terms of what is the right use case that you want to apply it to rather than painting everything with an agentic AI brush and then just diluting the value proposition altogether. That would be
Mm-hmm.
my couple of cents worth.
Yes. Nabil, what do you see? Are companies doing okay, or are they still really floundering with AI these days?
I think it's a pretty broad spectrum. There are companies that are really maturing as far as their use of all sorts of AI is concerned, and then there are companies who haven't even started. But if you were to generalize it, like the bulk of enterprises that sit in the middle, I would say that, if I were to characterize, I would say the honeymoon phase is over, but
Mm-hmm.
we're still in a pre-scale phase.
Hmm.
The way I think about it is, and I talk to a lot of our customers globally, and it depends upon who you're talking to. If you're talking to the CEOs, they're like, or the boards, they're like, oh my God, we are all in on AI. They
Mm.
already think everything is done, and they are AI native people right now.
Right.
You go a little bit down and you talk to the CIOs and CTOs, and they're like, oh my God, look at this. I have like 27 pilots or like 470 demos or whatever the case might be. But
Mm-hmm.
then when you actually go to the operating level of the companies, I think it's just not integrated yet. And we haven't scaled it. And I'm generalizing it. There are obviously use cases that are doing very well, but if you generalize it, so I would say that's where it is. So people are like, not, it's not a novelty anymore. It used to be like, oh my God, new toys. So we are kind of past that phase.
Mm-hmm.
But is it now entrenched at scale in the production operations of the enterprises? Probably not yet.
Right.
Will we get there? I think we will, but I think we're kind of like in the middle somewhere. I would call it pre-scale at this point in time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sean, your sense, is it there yet? Are we pre-scale? What is your sense?
Yeah, I mean, I can only agree with my fellow panelists. I mean, one challenge we have when looking at adoption is that the adoption surveys and statistics are all over the map if you try and look at them, right? So there's I was in Brussels a couple of weeks ago, and there was a survey done by the European Commission, and they said only 13% of European companies had adopted AI.
Mm.
And just a couple of days ago, McKinsey comes out with their state of AI and found that 88% of companies had AI in at least one function, and 40% were already seeing a meaningful impact on profit, right? So these surveys are all over the place.
Right.
From personal observations, though, just to add to the other panelists, we have a lot of discussions with companies where that you can see them going through that organizational learning curve still. And I liken it to the kind of discussions we had with cloud 10 years ago. So I'm in calls with a lot of lawyers, for example, and procurement people who are asking about things like, hey, contractually, can you guarantee the output of the model?
Mm.
Right? How do the regulations in this industry apply to it, which of course is mathematically impossible. So if we're talking to probabilistic models and Gen AI. So Going through that learning curve, obviously a lot of pressure on them to get AI in place. But now like the rubber's really hitting the road, and it's like time to scale it and building these capabilities. And then just to Beena's point, I mean, there's not one AI, right? So they've maybe gone through that a little bit with some of the first wave of like machine learning and a little bit with generative AI. Now we come with AI agents on top of that now, right? Which add kind of new complexity in terms of like how autonomous they are and these kind of things. So yeah, summary, learning curve, but nothing unexpected when we look at new technologies.
But Sean, you're hearing there are companies out there who really want actually a legal guarantee, saying it's going to work exactly like this. Is that's really happening? Am I understand you correctly?
That is one example, yes. Yeah. So we've had some requests from legal, again, well-meaning legal teams
Sure.
about explainability, things like this that would be great, but still aren't really technically feasible. Yeah.
That's interesting. All right, but what about the most overhyped belief or expectation about AI in the near-term future that deserves correction? What kind of mistakes are people making? Ron, what do you see? What's something that really might not be quite correct?
Yeah, the trend is already changing, but I'll draw attention to the notion of bigger is better, right? So the way I look at it is the current AI landscape is incredibly inefficient.
Hmm.
The analogy that I use is it's like using a sledgehammer to crack a walnut. And I think that 2026, the AI arms race to build the biggest, best general purpose LLM will slow down, and it's starting to already as costs escalate with diminishing returns and executives at different levels start scrutinizing ROI. For me, the future is all about scaling, value realization, and measurable value that can be realized. So I believe that you will see a significantly greater focus than ever before on small domain-specific language models
Hmm.
that are trained for specific industries or for high precision use cases and can deliver real value at the optimal price point.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
simply put, it's the AI horse race will change from bigger is better to a fit for purpose approach, is my humble contention.
makes perfect sense. As we came into this year, it seemed like the phrase small language model might be one of the biggest buzzwords, but then agentic AI really overtook it, it seemed. But small makes perfect sense. Nabil, your sense, an overhyped belief or expectation?
Oh God. I
Many of
I would actually, and I know considering that we are in an AI panel, so that's kind of a bit of a
Hey, but Nabil, you said that we all are going to be wrong, so it's okay.
yeah, exactly. Right?
them.
So,
There's
so
no
I
pressure if
I
you know you're
put
going to be
that
wrong.
caveat there, right? So just
Exactly.
Yes.
save everybody, right? But I actually think that the biggest misnotion or the biggest hype is that AI creates value. It actually doesn't. It's the application of AI, orchestration of it across your systems, across your operating model, and more importantly, integration of it in your data systems, record, or source of record, as well as your workflows. That's what creates value. And I think what we're seeing more and more is that people are like, oh, yes, we're moving to AI and it'll create so much value and we're going to cut so many jobs and stuff. And I think that's really what the hype is. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, that honeymoon phase is a little bit over. We have all seen like, and I give this example all the time when I speak, is like we've all seen news flashes like, oh, a 17-year-old with like pick up whichever AI application or IDE you want, sat together and rebuilt a $60 million application in like 3 hours, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
That has created this kind of hype that, oh, AI can solve all of these things on its own. And unfortunately, the higher up you go into an organization, the more blind they are. It just starts from the board and it's like, oh, so you mean like your operating, expense will go down by 40%, right? So that starts at the board, it goes to 20% at the CEO, and then it trickles down from there. So I think that's really the biggest hype. And it's not really AI by itself. It's really the application of AI into your operating model or whatever else you want to apply it to. And I think that hype is still there. Do I see it kind of coming down? Not really. I actually think that it's continues to go up. More and more companies are falling prey to AI will solve this, right? And I think we need to get past that. That's what I feel as kind of like the biggest hype, that the sooner we correct it, the better we can bring everybody down to reality and get to real value, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Sean, your sense, some overhyped belief or expectation? What do you see?
Yeah, sure. This one's going to sound extremely biased and self-serving coming from me at SAP. But this notion that we hear sometimes about AI agents replacing SaaS.
Mm.
So this stemmed from some comments from probably Satya Nadella, where it said, ERP is just a database with some logic on top, and it taken a little bit of context. And of course, a lot of the the LLM vendors want to start to like move up the stack, and think that's possible. And also, I mean, couple that with the release of this model context protocol last summer, and agent-to-agent protocols. So these are like standard protocols that allow large language models to interact with enterprise systems through APIs in a much more structured manner. So increases their capabilities quite a bit. And that fear kind of leaks out sometimes. So I do have some discussions with CIOs who say, which is a fair concern, reasonable concern to have, hey, I'm starting this big cloud migration. It's going to go live in 2 or 3 years. Will there still be SaaS in 2 or 3 years, right? Or will everything just be agents? And I mean, to be fair, no analyst firm, if you talk to like a Gartner and IDC, none of the big investment companies thinks that that can be the case, right? So, we're big fans of neural symbolic AI, where you capture these business processes explicitly represented with things like knowledge graph as a semantic layer and all the business processes in the code. And any agents need that substrate underneath, right? They need that digital core, that system of record to actually be able to execute things. So, and they need a modern one, frankly, as well, right? So, we see that getting to like a clean core, we call it, right? So getting to SaaS in the cloud as an important step and a prerequisite to being able to actually leverage generative AI and AI agents.
So SaaS is not dead in your view.
SaaS is not dead. No.
No.
It's a prerequisite, I think.
Gotcha. Beena, your view, what's the misunderstanding that people are having?
I think I'll go back to my earlier point, right? When I say agentic AI is still in its early phase, what I mean is, um, and that's the mistake, or what people are not getting is this is truly transformational technology. And if we look at it at a use case level, or trying to do piecemeal, use cases or solutions, what's happening today is you're applying Band-Aid on processes and technologies that were built for a different era. I fundamentally think that we need to rethink how we apply this technology and reimagine, the entire, whether it's a process or the kind of roles that exist. This is an opportunity to actually use this as a transformational technology and completely reimagine your organization, your business. Focus on the outcome and try to think through, why does this role exist? Why does this process exist? Don't try to do piecemeal band-aid type solutions with such a powerful technology. And that's the missing piece. If we look just at the technology and try to fit it into existing constructs, I think we are not getting taking full advantage of the technology.
Well, then you're really saying that agentic AI won't be just a helpmate. It'll actually completely reform the enterprise.
It is about rethinking when agents and humans work together. What does that look like? Right? Everything that we've done so far didn't have that construct in our thinking. 10 years ago, nobody was thinking about that, right? So now, if you're thinking of autonomous agents or semi autonomous agents and working closely, when we talk about every worker having a co-pilot, what does that mean? And what does that work look like? Is it still an 8-hour job, or is it, something more different, right? That fundamental redesign is not happening, and we are rushing into putting band-aids. And that's what I'm trying to say, that we're very early phase with the technology
Interesting.
option.
Chad, your view, a big misunderstanding?
Well, first, let me give a shout out to Ram because this is one of the things that I talked about last year, this move to smaller, more domain-specific models. And I think we're seeing that, right? There still is a place for these large state-of-the-art models. But when the outcome that you're looking for is very vertical specific, domain specific, very localized, there's a 50 billion parameter model with good retrieval outperform a reasoning, very, very large model. For certain use cases, yeah, it's going to, and it's going to be a lot less expensive for enterprises to deploy and to support. So full agreement there. But if I think about what I think is the most overhyped thing at the moment, it's probably vibe coding
Mm.
as I'm not going to get on the bad side of a lot of my software engineer friends and my son who is doing this in college right now. I just think that the understanding of the data structures and the workflow and the process for these enterprise applications, which tend to be long-lived and have lots of tribal knowledge associated with them, I think vibe coding is not there yet.
I totally agree on that one. Yeah, vibe coding got a lot of hype, but I mean, come on, you need actual engineering, not just coding to make applications.
Somebody has to
Can I
write code.
just share that I hate the term? I insist to everybody that I talk to, including customers, when they say, "Hey, I vibe coded this in 3 hours. What can you guys do that's better?" I said, first of all, let's call it AI augmented coding. For enterprise use cases, vibe coding to me is the 17-year-old or a 92-year-old gentleman who built this vibe coding based app for their local church gathering for gathering funds or something like that. But I mean, when you're talking about serious enterprise apps, it has a place, but there's so much more in the delivery discipline, scaling and operationalizing that needs to go. Not to mention the tribal knowledge and the IP that's grown that Chad alluded to, that simply cannot be what do you call ignored.
And I think we should talk a little bit more about vibe coding because that's the biggest hype. I think it's phenomenal. I love it, right? But for the right reasons. I think it is one of the most powerful things for ideation and prototyping.
Fully agree.
And
Yeah.
so which is I think like I'm agreeing with the rest of the panel here. And I personally think if a company and being a product organization or a technology organization, if you're not using vibe coding in ideation and prototyping, you will be left behind. It's just as simple as that. But the flip side of it is it is not meant for production and scale, right? So, one of the things that we're seeing is that things like vibe coding or agentic AI, I'm a big fan of agentic AI, and we have massive uptake of it in our install base. So maybe I'm a little bit different view on that. But these kind of things are great for, from 0 to 30. It gets you from 0 to 30 in like fraction of a second. But then you got to go the rest 30 to 60, right? That's the production and the scale, and that still takes a long period of time. And actually, AI native applications take longer to scale than the traditional SaaS applications. That's what we're seeing. So prototyping has reduced to almost instant, but scaling has actually increased. So I feel like all of these hypes, they have their value in certain places in the chain, and they're beautiful there. But when you take it out of the context that, they can do everything, that's where the problem really happens. Yeah.
That's true with AI in general, right? It feels like it's one solution fits all, and that's a fundamental challenge we have with this.
Agreed. And back to this topic of vibe coding, right? I think it has its place, as Nabil said. I actually think it is a product manager's best friend because they do not have to depend on development teams to do these instant prototypes. And you can test your ideas and concepts with customers so much faster and accelerate the development cycle without being held hostage by your engineering teams. That's a big, big plus as a software engineering organization. So it has its place. It's overhyped.
Well, let's look ahead. If you really look, the year 2026, what is your boldest prediction for AI next year that you believe, and maybe your peers may or may not even believe? Sean, your prediction?
Yeah, sure. So I think that more value can be generated by non-LLM based foundation models than the current large language models. So let me unpack that a bit, right? So for your viewers. So large language models are based on a particular kind of neural network architecture called attention-based transformers. Okay, this was a paper that was published in 2017. And what they do is they basically scrape the internet and they have huge volumes, like trillions and trillions of words, right? And it predicts the next word in the sentence, okay? And then based on that, super simplified, right? You get these emergent capabilities like coding out of it, right? Summarizing text, immense value, right? I always tell people if LLMs were frozen tomorrow, we could still generate another 5 or 10 years of value out of them, right? By applying it. But that's only one kind of foundation model, right? And we see other kinds emerging now, such as Fei Li's startup just released something called a world model. So it's actually predicting like physics and how the world interacts. We see physics-informed neural networks in robotics so that they can learn, right? We see the first things like Sora for video generation. And the one that we're most excited about at SAP is something that we released a couple weeks ago called RPT-1. So it's Relational Pre-trained Transformer, we call it. And it's basically a foundation model that does mathematical calculations, which large language models cannot do. So these are things like forecasting demand, giving a supplier a risk score, predicting a delivery date and a price. So all these kind of things. And I'll point to Eric Siegel. So he's the author of Predictive Analytics. He was running Predictive Analytics World for a long time. He has a nice piece on Big Think where he said, "Hey, LLMs, great value, right? Amazing, but a lot of the value that we get from AI is really in these kind of like forecasts and numerical predictions, right? Google Maps optimize my trip to get there, right? Give me a good weather forecast, these kind of things." So I think we're just still at the beginning. Large language models, fantastic, but there's so many other areas that we can apply this technology.
Yeah, I'm just learning about the world models. It's more about insight rather than like sheer volume of information, correct or incorrect? Or it's
Yeah,
hard to generalize at that level.
I think it is, yeah, but I think that's also a trend as well, by the way, right? It's not just about the volume of data, it's how good the data is labeled and structured, and you can still get a lot of value out of that.
Hmm. Ram, your boldest prediction for AI in 2026?
Okay, I'm going to go the other way in
Mm,
terms of away from the enterprise.
mm,
I actually believe that we're going to see a rise in the use of AI-based elderly care and emotional support care.
hmm.
And this is why I believe that. If you look, say, 10 years back or so, when the initial chatbots came, last 5, 10 years, when the initial chatbots came, I hated the chatting with the virtual assistant. That has matured now and gotten to a stage where there are studies that attest to, with data points, compelling facts, supporting facts, that an AI based agent, conversational agent, when you want to have a digital interaction, is actually the preferred medium of communication for people over talking to a regular person, a human being, because the AI is inherently patient, empathetic, and notwithstanding some adjustments you can do, it is much more pleasurable for people to talk to. Extrapolate that to the next level. There's an increase in number of elderly people, disabled people that are living in solitude or not with full support. AI based assistance and emotional support, and even people that are lonely, right? So, that kind of capability is going to become more and more mainstream starting in 2026, is my bold prediction.
I think you're right about that one, Ram. Personal opinion. Beena, your sense, bold prediction for 2026?
Okay, hear me out. So, starting next year, I think we'll see the emergence of truly AI native companies that operate fundamentally differently.
Hmm.
And they'll redefine what's possible. The key idea is that companies that win over the next 5 years won't be the ones that use AI to do existing work, like 20% faster or 25% faster. It'll likely be the ones that completely redesign work from the ground up, assuming AI is a given. So we're going to see a new category of organizations, right? We had digitally native organizations coming in. Now we'll have, AI native organizations with completely reimagined operating models, humans focusing on the core human skills, judgment, relationships, etc., and AI handling analysis, synthesis, execution, entire new job categories or existing job categories restructured, not eliminated to cut costs, but reimagined because we finally can build what we always wished we could, right? And I think the performance gap can be pretty dramatic with the AI native companies because they'll be able to move faster, produce higher quality work, and innovate at speeds that seem impossible. So, everything that we've been seeing so far, right? The pieces are there. So, how do you connect it together? It's not about adding tools to your current workflow that you can take, but it's about companies that will fundamentally ask, if we were building this company from scratch today with all the AI tools and capabilities available, what would we build differently? And I think that question unlocks really new possibilities. And this will be a new crop of AI native companies that will start coming in starting next year.
Hmm. I like the term AI native. Does that mean that those companies would have fewer human employees or not necessarily? And then I guess the other part is, seems like the jobs would be defined and redefined almost continuously. So someone
Yeah,
might work for an AI native company for, 4 months, but then they're on to something else because the job has been reimagined over the course of 4 months.
I think so. I think we're going to start seeing the emergence of that new trend.
Fascinating. Chad, your big prediction for 2026?
I think Beena and I are very copacetic on that because if you think about what we went through as cloud started to happen, as container technology started to happen, we had companies that, Gartner would have called it mode one, mode two, or we would call it companies born in the cloud, where you're going to do everything completely differently than you would have before. You're going to have companies that are born in AI. And you're right, there's going to be a lot of different roles. There are going to be functions that would have normally existed in a company founded just 2 years ago. That's the one that's founded tomorrow. They're just not going to exist anymore. So you're going to start to see again treating not just applying AI to a workflow, but building those workflows flows with the assumption of AI. Again, the assumption is the agent is the interface, not our traditional interfaces. That many of the human interfaces that we're used to will simply go away and be replaced by an agent interface. And then this also, I think, drags that idea of localized, verticalized models to do certain things very, very efficiently and very, very well will start to permeate the enterprise, and we'll start to see new kinds of companies.
Makes sense. Nabil, your big prediction for next year?
Yeah, so first I agree with Beena and Chad on the AI native companies, but I'm going to focus my prediction on the good old, the poor existing companies that hopefully will
They, they,
survive.
they still matter, I believe.
Yeah, they
They do.
still matter, right?
Yeah.
Just taking a slightly different angle, I actually believe that the next year is not the year of AI, but the year of the application.
Hmm.
And then let me kind of talk about what do I mean by that. I think the current stack, the way it is kind of forming, good or bad, but that's how it's forming, is that okay, this is like how your applications are built, and now let's apply application like AI on top of those applications, whether they are chatbots or whether they're agents and stuff. So if you really look at it, people are applying AI towards where the human interfaces with the application. So that's the stack as it's developing today. And I actually believe that next year it will invert because the best use of AI is actually not at the interface with the human, but actually at the core, right? So what will happen is that it would not be applications that have AI in it, but it will be applications that are built on AI core, right? And I think that's the inversion of the stack that we'll see because whether we like it or not, there's a lot of people, and most of the people, they still like their dashboards. They still like their application interfaces. And quite frankly, chat is not the best interface for every enterprise workflow that needs to be out there. Neither is the agentic interface, right? So the way I'm thinking is that this is so take the familiar of the application, right? But then redesign it on the substrate of the AI so it actually has the powers of the AI. So AI is actually best suited at the substrate level and not at the expression level. The expression level for the timing we were talking about the next 1 year, I actually think applications are the best suited expression, for enterprises, most of the enterprises out there. It's the substrate that needs to change. And if you really think about it this way, and I think some of the panelists kind of alluded to that as well, the issue is like, okay, you take an application, you apply an AI on it, great. It was already siloed, and then you've siloed it even further on top of it. But when you are kind of creating this new AI core for the enterprise, then you can build applications on top of it. And by the way, these are not going to be big, massive applications, that we are used to right now. These will all be what we call as micro apps. They're small, they can be developed very quickly. They're very use case specific, they're very domain specific, they're short-lived, and all that kind of stuff. And then the core that we are talking about AI, there's three things, I think three words that we'll hear a lot more. Number one is expertise. And I think that's what Ron and Sean were talking about. Generalized LLMs, they are not necessarily the experts in every use case out there. So whether there's a small language model, domain-specific models, there are multiple different ways to do that. But expertise for the use case, we will hear a lot more about it in the core, right? Second thing that we'll hear is context. I think, Sean, you kind of talked about the knowledge graphs and, whether that's ontology, that's like the legacy, tribal knowledge that is there. How do you bring it in there? How do you tell AI, how does these things relate to each other? AI cannot really figure it out on its own. You have to train the AI to do that. That's the context. And the context is industry specific, customer specific, and sometimes even use case specific. And the last one, of course, is still the control part, which is the governance part, which is like what it can and cannot do. So my bold prediction is this will be the world of not AI, but apps. AI will go down into the substrate, and you will hear three words more and more, which would be expertise, context, and control.
Does that mean the human customers interface less with the AI or not necessarily?
I actually believe that that's very generational. You know,
Right.
I think the answer to that is very different depending on which generation you're talking about.
Totally.
And if you're talking about like call it like Gen Zs or Gen Alphas, like my kids are sitting in Gen Alphas. I mean, they are so comfortable. They don't need any computer. They just want to talk to somebody. But if you look at the bulk of where the enterprise workspace or workforce is, that's still like kind of Gen X, maybe a little bit like not a little bit, but millennials and Gen X really make the bulk of, the enterprise workforce right now. For them, the existing application interfaces still rule, and that will not change. And I think that's why I'm saying that for the time being, for the next maybe 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, we need to invert the stack. Now, what happens in 10 years, that's a very, very different kind of thing. There, I agree with Beena that the AI native companies, yes, they will work very differently, but to me, it's still very much tied to the generations that are mostly in the workforce.
All right. Well, I'd like to get the advice from the five of you. I mean, what advice do you give to enterprise executives who need to make buying decisions for a multi-year time frame regarding AI technology that seems to change constantly every few months or faster? How can companies be best prepared for the changes ahead? Chad, help them out. What would you say to them?
A few quick hits. One, expand your thinking around your ROI models. I've written about this on LinkedIn. There are a lot of different ways to measure ROI than just how much can I save for a given workflow, for a given application, or for a given task. Secondly, don't limit yourself to a solely on-prem or a solely cloud strategy. We've learned time and again in this business that it will be a hybrid strategy, despite what we hear.
Mhm.
Consider those smaller verticalized models with expertise, to use Nabil's word on this. And then finally, and as we would always say, invest in AI literacy among your talent. That's going to be very important.
AI literacy for sure, no doubt about that one. Beena, your advice to executives, they're floundering, they need to spend money, but they need some help. What advice would you give them?
I think Chad pretty much covered all the key ones. The only thing I would add is, just be constantly aware that the technology is still evolving and changing. So it is not a once and done thing, right? So be prepared to be nimble, agile, and make your business case in such a way that, there's constant budget for innovation and experimentation as new technology comes into play.
Mhm. Nabil, your advice for executives who need to look into the future?
Yeah, and this is like not just for this panel. This is exactly what I tell, when I talk to our customers in person. Um, don't buy features or capabilities that exist today. Buy architectures, invest in architectures because LLMs will change, even techniques, will change, technologies change so fast. But if you buy into an architecture, and I'm not talking about architecture from a vendor, I'm talking about your operating architecture, right? Okay, so how do you deal with data? How do you deal with this new core that we are talking about? How do you deal with expertise and context? And control on top of it, and then how do you build applications on top of it? That's really an architecture, so an enterprise level architecture. So invest in architecture, and the first thing that you do is you already assume that every piece of the architecture will change. So that's part of the architecture, and I think that's what Chad and Beena were kind of pointing towards as well. That would be my first thing that you invest in. The second thing I would say is that invest in yourself. I'm talking to the CXOs.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many of the executives that I see, they're still operating in the old school model where it's just like, oh, I have my team do the work and they give me like a little brief and I'll read the brief and then I'll sound so smart about it and I'll have the buzzwords. That is just simply not going to work, right? So, back in the day, you got to the higher positions by, delegating and by saying that, hey, I don't get involved into the details and, I'm just a decision maker. I think that model needs to be chucked out of the window. We need to go back the way we were, when we were, frontline engineers or product managers or sellers and stuff. And you really need to get your hands dirty in it. Try it, use it. I think like Ram, you talked about it. So the product management team, we kind of gave them like, hey, I gave them 3 hours to wipe code a new idea. But before I did that, I showed them the one that I wipe coded in 3 hours, right? So lead by examples, get in there. It's chaotic, but in chaos, you lead from the front. I know, very cliche, but I think that is more true now than ever. So I think those would be my two pieces of advice, to executives out there.
It's a big hill to climb, though, because you think about AI is so much more complicated than anything came before. Like cloud is quite simple. Expect an executive to learn about, what is a neural network? Like, really, I have to understand that. Like, you have to almost have to go back to college to learn some of the ideas.
Actually, you
One,
don't.
one thing I would
Yeah.
just point to that is just there are different levels of understanding, right? You don't need to go into like how a transformer model works, right? That's not what I'm kind of talking about. It's more on the applied side of it, right? So say, for example, if you're driving a car, you might not necessarily need to understand how the engine works, but you should know how the car drives,
Sure.
right? So that's the analogy there. So how do you apply AI to it, and what is possible and what you can do or not do? But yeah, not like how neural networks work or how deep learning works and stuff like that. That's obviously not the case there. But it's really trying to use it in your own way. It's kind of really goes back to leading from the front, leading by example, right?
Mhm.
That's kind of like because yeah, if they start learning the engineering part of it, that would get a little complicated.
Indeed. Sean, your advice to executives, and we know that we need it.
Yeah, yeah. Just building off Nabil's points. I mean, I'll put this in two buckets. One is investing in that digital foundation. So investing in data quality, right? Having quality data, right? Context rich, standardized, harmonized data. I mean, you can't go wrong with that. So like no matter what new model comes out in the next few years, or even AI side, I mean, I think this is a very sustainable investment that companies can make. I still speak to far too many executives who say, "Hey, I really want to do AI," and they're on really like legacy systems, highly customized. Look, you can do anything with developers, right? If you throw enough effort at it to build use cases, but it's hard to scale it, right? So any investments in data quality, I think, are sustainable, right? And the second bucket, when there's so much uncertainty and this high pace of change. I'm a big fan of something in strategic management called real options theory.
Hmm.
So it means you make some investments now to build some capabilities, and then that gives you the option in the future to quickly pivot into that direction. Okay. So run pilots in your company, adopt even small use cases to go through that organizational learning curve. An example of SAP with that was 2.5 3 years ago when this Gen AI hype kind of like all started. Look, every week there's a new model coming out and new innovations, and so we partnered very very broadly with all the model providers, and we built this abstraction layer on top. And when there's a new model coming, then we can quickly integrate it and pivot to that model, right? And that's a big investment to build that up, but for us it lowers the risk. And so just think about in your business, what are these investments I can make now that I don't know how things are going to turn out, but would at least give me the option to move in that direction when that next big breakthrough comes.
Hmm. Ram, your advice, there's an enterprise executive who needs to make a buying decision. What would you tell them?
First off, there's a lot of brilliant points raised by my fellow panelists. I concur with pretty much all of them. I'll augment a couple of these to the point that Nabil made. It's all about being AI curious. That's what I use as the phrase. And synonymous with that is learning by doing, which Nabil alluded to. You have to get your hands dirty, you have to do stuff, and you don't need to know the bowels of the core engineering constructs behind it. How do you apply it? How do you solve a problem with these new sets of capabilities that are at your disposal? It's another type of technology like any other. Don't let the what do you call technical mumbo jumbo get in the way of learning. Be curious and go embrace it. That's bucket one. Second is the point that Sean raised. To me, to maximize what an organization gets from their AI investments, the onus is on data quality and data availability. And Sean talked about data quality. I'll build on that a little further in terms of it's about the end-to-end management of data pipelines that are at the heart of enabling any AI use case. So that's something that organizations need to invest in, whether it's legacy considerations or new packets of unstructured data that have been opened for exploitation by AI. So that's with data availability. It's a slightly different equation where the regulatory conundrum comes into question. So there's a bunch of different techniques. One was basically synthetic data generation, which is becoming more and more commonplace. And that I think is something that organizations should draw on to readily and quickly build and deploy their AI use cases. Those are the couple of addendums that I would put forth.
Great. Well, that was a fantastic conversation. Chad, Beena, Nabil, Sean, Ram. I mean, that was great. Thank you so much for your expertise. And I think we need to do this again. Maybe we won't even wait a year, but thank you very much.
I think we need to move at the pace of AI. So another one quickly.
That's it certainly might even be daily. I don't know. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us here. Thank you.
It's wonderful. Thank you.